We are into the second session of Lesson 5 in Part 2 of the theory course, where we're talking about how to build chords. So we're going to jump into it, and just so we have our bearings, we're on the same page. This is where you can find, if you go to mycolormusic.com, there are various playlists, and I'm going to scroll to the music theory course playlist. And within this playlist, we are in Lesson 5, how to build chords. So the first lesson of Part 2, and for you to follow along with these live sessions, the theory course live is what we're doing here, where we're geeking out and we're talking about all of these concepts and going through each of the lessons page by page, image by image, with some sidebars and expounding on some of the ideas, because what we're talking about here is really important, especially when we get into chords, which are a fundamental building block of songs. But as you've seen leading up to this, the fundamental building block of chords are built upon the atomic level of notes and intervals, which is a geometric framework in music. So it's super tempting, as I fell into this temptation when I first got into music, of just wanting to jump into chords. Let me strum some chords, let me play some chords, let me make some music, let me just really just get into it. And that shortcut ended up being a detour because I didn't really take the time to learn the fundamentals. So once you see that music is geometry, it's predicated upon a consistent framework of patterns, then as we're getting into these chords, it all starts to make sense. So let me pull up Lesson 5, where I'm going to pick up where we left off on the last session, which is we can see this C major chord, for example. C, E, and G is made from notes C, E, and G. And between C and E is a major third, which is part of this geometric star of triangles, major thirds. Between E and G is this minor third from the squares, and then the perfect fifth between C and G is from the star of perfect fourths and fifths. So this hidden framework of geometry is informing all of the patterns in music. So we're going to continue on. The main patterns of music are, like I say, this star, and this star. And there are 6 main patterns in music. Harmonies are founded on these 3, but we're going to dive even deeper into the formulation of chords, and it's a simple formula. So let's jump into it, shall we? So over the past few pages, we definitely took a deeper dive into the structure of chords to explore all the subpatterns and connections that are found in each one. And we did this so that you're well informed as you go on to use chords throughout the rest of this course. But with all of this talk about triads, tertian intervals, and the geometry of music, it's also easy to lose sight of how simple chords really are, and the fact that each one is built by playing every other note of the major scale. That's all. So to gain some perspective, let's take a step back to look at these patterns in another way by picturing all of the chords of a key in a table format like this instead. So on the guitar, we can play each of these chords by picking out their patterns. But looking at it with a kind of X-ray vision in this format, in a table format, we're really breaking it down. So like I say, we're going to be getting into the chords on the guitar, but to even just understand the layout and structure of these chords is super helpful. So if we take this C major scale, and I'm going to be pulling up the keyboard as well to kind of illustrate some of these concepts as we make our way towards the fretboard. So we have the C major scale. Let's see, this is probably easier here if you can see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And by starting on each respective note and combining every other note in groups of 3, we end up with 7 harmonies in the key of C. And that's what this illustration is showing here. We start on the C note, and we have the C major chord. Start on the D note, every other note, from the C major scale, and we get the D minor chord. starting on the E note, every other note forms the E minor chord, and so on. So with this new view, the inherent simplicity of it all comes into focus. As you can see along the top, the C major scale is laid out in one long sequence from left to right, repeating itself through different octaves. So that's what I'm describing this illustration here. So along the top is the C major scale, and below this pattern, the various triads, 3-note chords, that stem from the scale are plotted too, so that the notes of each chord align with the scale degrees that spawned them. Get it? And what stands out is the alternating pattern used to construct each chord. That is the every other sequence of notes starting at each scale degree that's used to produce the 7 triads found in each key. It's actually a simple and consistent pattern that's easy to use, and as you can see over the next few pages, it also explains how the chords in every key are built. So we just looked at the chords in the key of C. So we have the C major scale right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And we form 7 different chords from that pattern of whole steps and half steps. Key of G follows the same pattern. We have whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And you can see it's the same. Now we're just in the key of G. And if we go through each of the 12 keys, it's the same thing. So we're not going to belabor the point and go through building the chords in each of the 12 keys, but I'm just going to scroll through these images. Definitely check out the PDF that goes with lesson 5. Take these in at your own pace and really see. You don't have to take my word for it, as LeVar Burton said back in the day. You can see for yourself. So I'm going to scroll through the 12 keys here, and we'll continue on with the lesson. So easy enough, right? At the end of the day, this every other pattern is what we all use to construct the chords in each key. It's such a nice, simple formula. And as you'll see next, the names used to label these chords are super simple too, now that you know how they're built. So again, as you go through the PDF in the lesson, and there's an accompanying video that goes with the lesson as well in the library playlist. The nice thing about this series is that we can geek out. Hey, Peter Anderson, it's cool to have you on. And we have chat as well, so we can talk through anything you want to as we go through these concepts. So we're going to get into the chord names, and this is definitely something that tripped me up for the longest time. I kind of didn't really think much about chords, the names, the letter names, or the numerals. We're going to get into the numerals as well. And it's all based on these underlying patterns. Once you understand the patterns, you understand the terminology. The labels or vocabulary of music is actually not very inventive. It's very descriptive. It's fairly bland, actually, once you understand the patterns. It sounds exotic, all of these terms that we're going to get into, but they're based on very predictable and consistent patterns. So naming chords. When you're new to the guitar and learning about chords for the first time, they can seem like such a mystery. Somehow, by combining a few notes, you can create some amazing harmonies where each one sounds greater than the sum of its parts. It's beautiful, really, and a bit like magic. And I'll say as a sidebar, I used to think this is just how chords were made, is you just combined notes, almost like math in this illustration here, and it's just, whoa, wow, that harmony sounds amazing. But we're going to get into the underlying logic of how those were formed, and it's going to make a lot of sense. So, though, of course, now that you've seen how they're built, you know that chords are just cool, not confusing, right? Because the formula used to make them all is actually anything but secret. And indeed, what this formula reveals are 2 essential insights. 1, each harmony is more than just a random collection of notes. In reality, they're all formed through a clear and consistent logic. And 2, each chord is also comprised of more than just notes themselves. In truth, they're also made up of intervals that inform their overall sound. Together, these points are important. Chords are structured, and they're built from both notes and intervals. But the second insight about the influence of intervals is especially important. And intervals, as I'll say it, I've said it once, I'll say it a million times, music is all about intervals. this geometric framework of music is all about intervals. So as you understand these relationships between notes, it really makes chords fairly simple, actually. Because you see that these tertian intervals are major and minor thirds are really what make each triad possible, which is why they're also reflected in the names of the chords themselves. To show you what I mean, here's another look at the 7 triads in the key of C, only this time the intervals within each pattern are emphasized. Okay, so we're going to explain this pattern. Here, let's just I'm going to do a sidebar and do a description on the fly, and then I'll get into the written text of the lesson. So here along the top, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? So we have a root note. A root note just means it's the underlying foundation of a chord. This R means root in this case. And between the root of C and its next note is a major third. So that's what this dark gray and capital M3 represents. I'm going to zoom that in a little bit. And then we have between E and G is a minor third, this lowercase m3. And then G is a perfect fifth, the P5 here. So this is basically looking at the chords with a kind of X-ray vision. We're looking at the skeleton or the skeletal structure of these harmonies. And you can see there's a definite formula, a logic to it. The root note of D, R, between that and its next note, F, is a minor third. And between F and the next note in the chord A of D minor is a major third. And then A is a perfect fifth above D. So same idea as you go down the line. E minor has a root note followed by a minor third, then a major third, and a perfect fifth. And this formula is consistent as you go down the line. Now, what I just said is going to be probably articulated better in the lesson description here. So to explain the symbols used in this image, here's a summary of each one. R, in music, the first note of each chord, based on its respective scale degrees of the underlying major scale, is called the root, or labeled R here. It's so called because it establishes the fundamental tone of the group, like a root in a plant. Get it? M3, capital M3, this symbol, as you've seen before, stands for the interval of a major third. I say as you've seen before if you've been in the previous sessions here as we've talked through illustrations. Minor 3, the lowercase m3, likewise, this symbol represents the interval of a minor third, as I just described. And then the little arrow symbol just signifies that it's the middle note of a triad, which can be either a major third or a minor third above the root, depending on the first interval shown. So again, just looking at those, we have a root, followed by either a major third or a minor third. We have the middle note, and then we have a perfect fifth as you go down the line. Okay, so let's dissect this more. A P5, this symbol stands for the interval of a perfect fifth, as you've seen previously, which is the sum of a major third and a minor third found in the various intervals. We talked about how in music, it can be confusing to think that a major third and a minor third equals a perfect fifth. If it was normal math, you would be like, okay, 3, a third plus a third, 3 plus 3 equals 6. But the intervals and labels and intervals used in music aren't normal math, right? So a major third plus a minor third equals a perfect fifth. 3 plus 3 equals 5. But when you understand that the numbers, the scale degrees, or intervals used in music aren't trying to follow normal math, it's not a normal number line. We just borrowed numbers from the maths to try to make sense of this crazy branch of mathematics called music. You don't have to understand math to understand music. Okay, so and then the D5, we didn't really look at that, but I'm going to pull up that image again. It's an abbreviation for diminished fifth, referring to the fact that this interval is just short of a perfect fifth, because the 2 minor third intervals in the diminished chord that make up that particular chord are a dissonant tritone above the chord's root. I'll pull up the image for that to make sense. So as a result, musicians call it diminished, meaning that it's less than or reduced rather than the perfect to describe its weaker and less pleasing sound. So let me just show that image. You have a D5 here in the diminished chord. All of the other chords, major and minor, have a perfect fifth, except for this D5 in diminished. And you can see that one of these is not like the other in that diminished has a minor third and a minor third. So 2 minor thirds equal a diminished chord. So it sounds a little more weak or less stable than a regular minor chord. Okay, so we're just getting into it. I'm going to continue on with everyone who is in locals in the community. We're just going to continue the stream, keep rolling, keep geeking out into chord labels, Roman numerals, and how these chords are formulated. So everyone who's not in the community will sign off for now. If you want to continue on, definitely check out the community, and we'll geek out together there. So thanks for being on, and we'll be doing more of these as we go. So let's see. I'm going to